All right. Before this gets too out of hand, let's go ahead and do a quick round of working group meeting. Could I get a designated note taker for today?
Yeah, I'll try it.
All right, thank you very much. First things up, any new faces? I don't see any new faces, but anyone want to say hi again? All righty, let's jump right into outstanding RFCs. First up, we have proposal to add Graal VM and update Graal VM CE build pack. I don't know what this is waiting for. This kind of looks like it has all of the approvals. I might nudge Dan Makuza on this and see what's up. Next up, we have codify the creation of new maintainer groups. This is a build pack that has all of the approvals. I should just merge it at this point. Jan and Dan were talking about potentially trying to find different structures for us to have conversations about decisions that is outside of like RFCs, and making RFCs maybe more of like a codifying step or more of like an architectural step. So potentially moving some stuff into like GitHub discussions, and then when a decision is made, putting that in some relevant place. I've been waiting for Jan and Dan to come and talk about this, but I think that they've both been busy. And I think that it is a larger question than just this RFC. So I think that I will probably merge this later today. Next up, we have standardized Paketo dependency metadata format. I don't actually think that there's any updates on this. I need to sort of poke everyone. I need to poke everyone one more round and then maybe go through and add a little bit of feedback in some of these unanswered questions. But I think that like the direct feedback that I've gotten, I think I've addressed all of that. I feel pretty good about the way that it's set up now. So yeah. And then finally, add RFC to discourage use of old bionic builders. This is something that I still have yet to have the opportunity to take a look at. I think clearly I do. I think, Rob, it might also make sense for you to take a look at this because directly affects builders.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I'm confused because I remember reading this and writing feedback and I don't see it. So I think maybe I close close the browser window before I hit send. Yeah, I mean, I know we can write the comments in the RFC, but like I feel a little conflicted about this. Like I get where it's coming from. I see the value in it. I also think it's kind of like, I don't know, like it seems like a little weird, right? I don't know, to like force builds to fail. But I also get the rationale. I also get like, I don't know, it just seems like a lot of like machinery, right? Like creating a whole new environment variable to allow you to run a deprecated stack because otherwise your build will fail. It seems like who's actually going to use that, right? And like, is that really the interface that we want to present to people that have to keep using Bionic for whatever reason? I don't know. I feel like I like the idea. I think there's some stuff in here that I haven't fully picked apart yet. So maybe that's why I didn't write my feedback. Maybe I hadn't fully figured out what I wanted to say.
Yeah, I'm a little confused about this as well, because like I agree that like the deprecation of Bionic has kind of been lackluster and it has been kind of difficult to roll out in any sort of enforced way. But like this also feels like maybe it's a problem as we increase like n number of stacks we support. But like this also kind of feels like an issue where like we're just gonna have to like this we're building up an entire like thesis for something we have to do every like what 2 years 4 years, however often we update our LTS stack, right? Like I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd be wary
I,
about failing them as well, because one of the key goals here of build packs and stuff was repeatable builds that you could get stuff back. So if I've got a copy of this stuff stored away and I want to regenerate an application that I built for a customer like 6 years ago because I need to build an exact one that's there for legal reasons, then that's not going to work well if I then have to add an environment variable, because I'd have to prove somehow that I haven't affected anything else by adding that environment variable at the same time.
that's fair. I think that in this case, that's probably not as much of an issue because if you were that concerned about reproducibility, you'd probably pick the SHA from the builder that you used 6 years ago, which wouldn't have the proposed build pack that
That's
requires
valid.
environment.
That's valid. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also, I don't know, I'm like a little loath to make like a whole build pack that all it does is like inspect the stack and say, hey, I don't like the stack, like, and you didn't set the override. I don't know. It feels like a good problem to solve, but I feel like I'm not convinced this is like the right way to solve the problem, but I don't have anything more constructive than that to add at this point. So
I,
I feel
I think it's worth probably pointing out that like running a build pack or adding a build pack to every single build, like even if it is something as simple as like I mean you could write this like really easily in bash, but even still like there is overhead to even just running a detect and no op build process in build. Like it's probably not like a crazy amount, but like it's one more thing that you have to keep track of, and like it's another build pack that has to be pulled, and it's like the Go buy it, like if we were to do it in Go, which is why like maybe we don't do that, but like it's like a non-zero amount of overhead just to add to every single build that we ever run ever again.
I wonder if you're thinking about it at the wrong level. Maybe this should be an annotation or a label on the builder itself that it says deprecated that should be part of CNB spec for a builder image, so that platforms that execute the builder image have got the choice then about how they handle deprecated builder images, whether they refuse to run them at all, whether they put out a warning, whether they, when they produce the build, do they label the application as being built with. But it feels like that if you're trying to say from the inside, from the deep down inside a build pack, say, hey, I'm in an environment that isn't supported, that's something that potentially should have been stamped on the outside of the box so that you're aware of that up front.
Yeah, maybe I think maybe that's like the right idea is we're trying to address this in build packs because that's what we have domain over, and maybe it makes more sense for us to basically like for the last like the last build that we published in Bionic, we have like a toggle, and basically that toggle says like this stack is like, or maybe we could have even done it for like the like 4 months or however much we wanted to leading up to when we would have actually like end of life our builder support. We could have just had it stamped deprecated as part of like the build process, and then you know pack and kpack and whatever platform you're using, like it can go like, okay, I see that this builder has done whatever, and then maybe if
Yeah.
you're incredibly sort of you're very paranoid about making sure that you do not ever run on any piece of deprecated software ever, you could fail. But yeah, for the most part, I imagine what it would do is it just print out like a bright red warning and then saying like, hey, this is deprecated, it's gonna receive updates, and you could even get more sophisticated. It'll receive updates until this date, and at which point it will no longer be receive updates. I don't know. So
Yeah.
maybe we should
I something
maybe this needs
raise
to
it.
be
I'll raise it on the CMB call that comes up. I think that's tomorrow. There's one for them. So
all right.
I'll see if there's any idea of that being good. If so, we can RFC it up at CNB, and then eventually it will come back down. But that'll help every ecosystem then of builders, not just the Paketo one, which is great.
Yeah, and I think like I was saying, it's like, oh, I don't know, this happens every 2 years, I don't know, but like with the introduction of UBI, which I assume isn't in the same lockstep support cycle as Ubuntu, and then
Yeah.
God forbid, maybe we support Alpine one day or something like that. Like I could see this becoming like a more necessary thing.
Yeah.
Great. I could try and capture that as some feedback and put it in to this RFC. Like during a discussion in the working group meeting, we discussed that maybe this would be better addressed sending it up and that sort of thing. I'll do that after this meeting though. Okay, I think that actually brings us to the top of our open RFCs. Are there any questions that people would like to have, or any comments that people would like to make?
Not on the RFCs, but I mean,
Okay,
I'm
cool.
happy to say that we've got Java in the UBI builder, but that's in project update coming up later.
Oh yeah. All right. In that case, then we will we move on to CNB updates and questions. First update: Pack just got a release, a mid KubeCon release of 0.32.0. It was released with a bug fix from Jericho. I believe this was around image util to allow for pointing at multiple platforms, i.e., architectures, helping to sort of flesh out some of the multi-arch build pack work that he is doing. It also has some, I think, some cache improvements as well. And then next up, we have Java in UBI Builder. This was merged like yesterday. If you're looking to run, if you are looking to generate a UBI image with Java inside of it, you can use the, I believe it's just UBI base builder in the Paketo community, and it should just work.
It's worked pretty well so far in testing with the stuff I've been running locally. I mean, it's worth putting on when we're just talking about recreatable builds and that. And now you were saying that the release cycles and support cycles, UBI is kind of odd in its own way, in that when you've got certain things like Java, you can't select the version of Java that you want to install. The free part of UBI is that the supported level is the level that you get when you do the apt install. Or not apt install in this case, DNF install from RPMs. But you can't pick to install older versions because the supported level is always the latest level that's available from the repository. So when you build a UBI application and we install a JVM, or when we install Node for it, you're going to get the latest supported level that will be used to build the application at build time, unless you've cached it somehow or you've locked that down. The only way to get that locked down is to go with custom build images, because you would have to build an image that had a copy of that built in permanently. I put that in the RFC for the UBI stuff when I wrote it all up the first time round, but it's nice to kind of just remind people at this point that that's the way this stuff is going to have to play out, because we can't run multiple back levels of Java's and nodes at different release levels. But no, it's up and running. It's cool.
Nice.
No, it's not. You can't select the version of Java. We can select between 8, 11, and 17, which are the releases. Sorry, thank you for writing the notes while I'm talking. But it's that we can't select the revision of it. So if you wanted a particular revision of like Node.js 16 or Java 17, because you needed the one that was built last week, because that had an odd behavior that you depended upon, you can't do that. You will always get the latest version of the runtime that is being selected. Does that make sense? Whereas the Paketo builder, you could have Belsoft Liberica 17.01.1347, whatever it was, and that's the exact JVM that you want it to use to build and run with. Here, you don't get that. You get the latest version of that major revision of Java to build against, and then the runtime one will be linked against whichever one the latest Paketo image is made for. And I believe the Paketo images are set up for the run stuff to track the releases of the UBI runtime images, so that as a new UBI runtime image comes out, they'll automatically push out a new version of the Paketo runtime image to correspond.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, yeah, thanks for correcting my notes. That makes more sense. I was a bit surprised we were like, can't pick the version of Java. I was like,
I can't pick the exact version. Yeah, the major language level, yes. But again, we only get 8 and 11 and 17. You can't pick other ones outside of that. And I don't think 20, at least I checked a week or so ago, but 21 isn't available yet as a UBI image. But when that is, we'll go through and add that in as an option as well.
Yeah, I believe, Rob, by the way, the same is true for Node. You can pick between like 16 and 18, but you can't pick any sort of sub versioning in between 16 and 18.
Yeah. On the UBI stuff, at least.
Yes.
Sorry, yeah, I thought you, Forrest.
No, not sorry, not in general, just for UBI. The same is true in Node.js UBI as is Java UBI.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. I have some more questions about UBI, but we can kind of put them to the open mic discussion section if there's anything else for project updates. If not, we can just roll straight in.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So first of all, I'll throw in a new question on top of my existing questions based on what you just said. So earlier in this conversation, Ozzy, you were talking about like the desire for like exact reproducibility, right? Like you gave the example, like I rebuild something from exactly 6 years ago. Like that's not going to be possible with your UBI, like with the UBI ecosystem. Okay.
No, the
so
only way that you could do that, and if the customer has a requirement for that, we'll have to advise them that they need their own builder images, and we'll walk them through how to build them. Because at that point, you would need to build a custom builder image that freezes the level of UBI, JV. Yeah, and at that point, frankly, you don't need the extensions to provide all the install. You might as well just build one up from scratch with a Docker file and say you're done. It goes two ways, doesn't it? Because you're simultaneously saying, I need to be able to rebuild this. But in saying that, you're also saying, I don't care about any security issues that will come up within that. So you've got those two requirements that are always going to be in contention with one another, that you want to be secure, but you want to be able to rebuild what you built 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, exactly. So without digging into your like commercial customers, this is an open source conversation.
Absolutely, yeah. But the same applies for open source. There are still customers out. I say customers, I mean users of the software stack that you're building. There are still people out there who are interested in those kind of goals, even if they're not paying for support or whatever,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I guess the other clarification was when you talk about locked down images, that's like analogous like offline images, right? That's kind of like making a fat image that contains the JVM with a specific version, and then the DNF install, I assume, has the ability to say, oh, I actually don't need to install this because it's already present on the file system.
It should do. However, I suspect that if we just did that today, DNF will go, oh, hey, there's a newer one, and just blap the one that's already there. So, yeah, there may be some more steps needed to tell it not to do that if there's one already in the base image beneath it.
Right, gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like that's not a primary concern at this point for you.
My main goal with UBI at this stage is get it to the point where it's able to build applications, which it's now capable of doing. And that's with now having an image that's capable of doing that means that we can start work on getting all the various tooling that needs to be able to cope with these kind of builder images up to the state where they can run it. Because one of the ones, like the classic CNB Tecton pipeline, can't cope with images with extensions yet. So we've got a lot of work to go yet before we can update those as well to allow those to run.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a good segue into sort of my actual question, which is we've been looking into like UBI a little bit with KPAC, and it does look like there are some like fundamental architectural limitations of like extensions. Like, for example, KPAC doesn't really easily support rebasing, and it doesn't really support image relocation when you don't know what you're like with extensions, right? You're basically giving like essentially a dynamically selected image at build or runtime, which you can't generally rebase ahead or relocate ahead of time, right? So first of all, you're nodding, so I hope that makes sense. It wasn't the best description, but it sounds like that makes sense.
I'm following.
So is that, I guess, like my question is like, is that a concern for you and like your consumers? Like, is that, I'm surprised basically that like rebase seems to be a thing that people do care about, but it doesn't seem to work with extensions. But is that a problem for you?
Rebase can work with extensions. You have to be very careful. So extensions don't change the image. It doesn't dynamically select an image at runtime. Rebasing can only change the run image, which is used to base the app on. So, rebasing. Extensions can only change the image that an application is going to be based on. So it can extend the builder image, and it can switch and or extend the run image. In the case of Paketo, we chose to only switch the run image, which means that what you end up with is a nice clean separation between the run image layer and the app layers that sit above it. And it's completely plausible to rebase. Like if you use the UBI builder at the moment and you built a Java application, you essentially end up with a Java application running on top of the Paketo Java run image. And you can rebase that to a newer Paketo Java run image at whenever point you want, and it will still function.
Okay.
because
Okay.
there's no customization. There's nothing that happens at runtime. The runtime image is just a run image and app layers. Now, if your extension, this is not something we're doing with the UBI extensions for Paketo, but if your extensions chose to modify and extend the run image, then you end up with layers that are the extensions to the run image, which exist below your app layers, but above the rebasable layer. And if you then swap out the base layer for something else, so say, for instance, we had one UBI run image for Paketo instead of going for run image switching as we go. And in that run image, we decided to install Java as a runtime, and then we apply the app on top of it. Then when you rebase, you're rebasing the empty UBI minimal underneath it. But the risk at doing that, in my mind, is that you could end up with a binary install of Java, the runtime, sitting on top of a base container that has never been tested against, because the only supported route to get the runtime installed is via DNF. So if you've taken those DNF files and just say, hey, I'll target them all up and apply them on top of a new UBI minimal, you're on your own completely, because those could have been linked against anything that was in the original image, which isn't there anymore, because as you well know, DNFs, as they do their install, can run scripts, and the script can say, oh, hey, this image is using this type of resolve comp for something, I'm going to do this to it, and you can't depend upon that. So you can still use that approach, but it isn't appropriate for what we were doing in UBI, so we avoided that with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that, I think I knew that we were just doing the wholesale replacement of the run image, and in part because I think run image extensions is like a later platform API version or Buildpack API version that we don't even support.
It's out now. They've already done it. It's available, but it definitely wasn't available in the same time frame as we were developing this, so it was easier to ignore. And
it sounds like even if it was, it probably wouldn't be the approach you would want to take for the UBI extensions, because for the reason you mentioned, you're basically sidestepping any like not just like support contract guarantee, but also your like potential API compatibility. Maybe that's
part of why the support is there, right? If it's gonna break, we won't support it, sort of thing. So that's one thing along those lines. So yes, that's kind of where we're headed with that. But you can imagine that for other runtimes, for other languages, for other build packs, there may be better opportunities for run image extension, depending on what you do and where you change things and what you put in. If you're only deploying statically linked Go binaries, you're probably fairly safe to get away with that. But if you're modifying things that might change in a rebased image, then you have to understand why. I think this is part of what extensions drives home, is that you can do a lot more damage with them, obviously, because they can modify everything. So you have to be a lot more cautious about how you allow them to interact with one another and which extensions you include into a build image. Yeah.
So thank you. This is super helpful. I have a couple more questions. So first one, just riffing off what you said, one of the cons of rebasing, having what I'm going to call like a single monolithic run image that you swap out. The main con I see of that, the approach you've taken, is that it's a large image, right? Like it's the minimal image plus the whole JVM plus like whatever libraries the DNF has to install to get like the JVM ecosystem working. So that could be like 500 megabytes that you have no ability to like break down. Well, I mean, the size is not my.
You can play games. I mean, if you're going to use DNF to install Java, you can also clean up after that and remove DNF and all the infrastructure that it put there to get Java installed, which is very common. If you look at how the base UBI runtime images are built that are published for, say, running a Java app, they're tiny, and they've done exactly that. They've installed everything they needed, and then they cleaned up and swept up after themselves.
Okay. So the file size is not a concern. Swapping up. Yeah. Okay.
File size isn't the problem. The problem with extending like that is you cannot guarantee what any RPM package will depend upon in advance, because of course the next one that comes out tomorrow could change that list of dependencies, and you'd be playing cat and mouse about chasing dependencies between mythical RPM packages that you didn't even know existed at the time when you created your extension, in order to try and figure out if it's still safe to rebase. So we avoided that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. We even run into that problem on like stacks. When we remove one package, it turns out it removes a bunch of other packages that then we actually kind of still needed. And and different changes in behavior in apps between like Jammy and Bionic also like a little confusing. That makes sense. I think my last question for you, and you kind of touched on this earlier, is like and it's something you put in the RFC, but I kind of wanted to like dig into it a little bit more. Like, what I think the question I want to ask is like, what is like, is there this in my mind, I have this like understanding that your consumers, closed source, open source, whatever, have a requirement to use UBI provided certified images. Is that statement true?
I'll go for the completely blunt commercial side of it, which is the easiest way to explain this, which is that if you want full support, then you need to be on a UBI image with a UBI supplied runtime. And that's got to be installed via a correct mechanism, i.e. via DNF, or because you're using an image that already had it installed that was supplied via UBI. If you meet all of those criteria, then obviously if you deploy your application to an environment where you're entitled for support, we can do more to help you if that application stops working than we can if you've taken a UBI image and used Bellsoft, for instance, as your Java, because we can't fix bugs in Bellsoft. We can in everything that we've shipped out. And that's the whole reason behind that chain is, you know, if somebody's looking for a UBI image, they're probably looking for that UBI image because they've got that contract in place. And it might not be via us. It could be by anybody else who's offering support in those areas. You know, Alma Linux, Rocky Linux, all of those are competitors that play in the same space and provide support as well. But they need to know that this thing has got that kind of pedigree, as it were, as an image when it's been created for hosting the application.
Yeah, and to phrase that the other way around, like if you were to go down the path that we adopted in Paketo for like the Ubuntu-based stacks of like kind of just pulling images or pulling like binaries from the internet or even compiling them ourselves, basically you would be on the hook for all of your customer support because the rest of Red Hat's like, hey, this is nothing to do with us. We didn't compile this, you know, JVM for runtime. Like that's the Paketo guy's problem.
Well, what would happen there is if like it was the same today, if a customer compiles an application using an Ubuntu Paketo Buildpack and deploys it, and then they come to us for support, we can say, well, we can help you with the application that you've written. But obviously, if there's a bug in the JVM, we can't help. If there's a bug in Ubuntu, we can help raise bugs against them with you, but we can't get you a fix in 24 hours or whatever contract you've stipulated. You know, it's going to be, and that's true going out in a wider scheme. So. That's kind of the reasoning why the UBI stacks are trying to follow that approach. Now, there's no reason why you can't, and you could still today run the Bellsoft ones and have it install that. Say you've got a contract with somebody who's willing to provide open source support via that, then sure, use that on top of a UBI stack. It's just a question of where you get it from. So,
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so I think that this is consistent with my mental model, which is basically like it's. The whole reason for adopting extensions and is the technical solution to the problem domain. The problem domain is like we want to create a way for customers to have like UBI certified tool chains like all the way down so that they can have their one-stop shop for support. I guess something I didn't realize that's I think implicit in what you just said is Red Hat UBI Java is a different distribution of the JVM that is not like Oracle and not Bellsoft, but it's like Red Hat's own distribution. The Red Hat like
it's
guarantees
OpenJDK. I believe the ones we're using are OpenJDK, but it's probably a Red Hat, and this is probably because I'm not part of that particular runtime team, but I believe it's a Red Hat distribution of OpenJDK that is compiled and built by them. Bear in mind that Red Hat's JDK team is comprised of the ex-IBM JDK team, which is huge. It's the #1 contributor to Java outside of Oracle. They've written, they've also, IBM's got experience writing its own JVM with J9 and all that stuff as well. So it's not a small thing to say that we can support the runtime that sits underneath it.
No, I understand that. And yes, anyone who watches this video after the fact will appreciate that. Shameless plug for Red Hat support.
Shameless plug.
Yeah. Okay, so that is actually really helpful because I think that's the piece I was missing. I didn't realize that like Red Hat was willing and able to provide that level of support for the Red Hat Java distribution. I was kind of assuming in my mind have that connection, which made this like supply chain thing a little bit more unnecessary.
In general, I mean, I'm obviously talking here about Red Hat, but I would hope the same would apply for any other company that's offering commercial support. Any of the runtimes that we offer, like Node, for instance, we're capable of doing the same level of support for. that we have a team that's looking after essentially either a fork or a different implementation of that standard, that spec, which can be shipped. Costas might be able to nod along and say more at this point. I don't know. He's far more node than I am. But the goal is, if we sell something, if we ship something as supported, that we're able to support that completely end to end. And that will mean for stuff like Paketo Buildpacks that most likely Red Hat will be capable of building those internally from a source mirror that will be kept of any given release that we ever ship, just because that's the only way that you can guarantee, say GitHub's not there tomorrow and you've got a customer that needs support, you've still got to be able to support them. And it's a huge undertaking, but that's the model that the company that I'm part of has followed for many years, and it's done them reasonably well. So
yeah. And the interesting, just to kind of round this conversation out, an interesting sort of analogy here is Canonical offers the same level of support for language families, like if you get them as part of the Ubuntu package. So that could be an interesting analogy for Ubuntu-based commercial distributions of Paketo.
So maybe there should be a Ubuntu-based builder that installs its stuff via apt here using extensions in a similar manner. That would be curious. That would be a great straight apple to apples then, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Yes, the Paketo project has no plans to support anything like that. Obviously, it's a commercial thing, but the symmetry is there. Cool. Thank you, Ozzy. I appreciate all of this, and apologies to everyone else who just was along for the ride. It was a very valuable. Yeah.
Hopefully, it was useful for other people as well. Just to
I learned some stuff too. So no worries.
I mean, I learned some of that stuff because originally, before IBM bought Red Hat, we were producing IBM products that were using Red Hat runtimes. And in order to provide support for those customers, that support layer was provided by Red Hat indirectly. And there were huge rules that you had to understand about what comprised a supportable application. And some of those have been weakened over time as open source is flexible and it migrates as users' needs change. And I think that's great. But what I'm aiming to do with the UBI stuff isn't to create a commercial platform here, because that's a different team that will go do that. I'm trying here to make something that is generically useful to as many people as I can make it useful for. And that's it. And if the commercial stuff needs more changes beyond that, then that will happen somewhere else, And I guess the changes should flow back upstream in an ideal world, right?
That's why they pay you. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that and various other things. But that's just the secret list of stuff that we blackmail them on.
Still job security.
All right. Well, I hope that was useful.
Okay. Is there anything else that people would like to discuss in open mic discussions or any other topics?
Something super minor. Sometimes I get a TLS error, failed to verify certificate X509 when I try to download the artifacts from the artifacts.paketo.io. I don't know. I mean, we have an office near here, so I get this error, but when I'm at home, I don't get this error. So do you plan to have get any certificate signed by a known authority, signed by an authority, or if you're not planning to do that, would you like to, or how easy is it to? I can send you the exact error that I get on the chat. If that helps.
Yeah, definitely send us that, because I'm just looking at the certificate for artifacts.paketo.io, and it's issued by Amazon. I'm just looking at Google's little view, so I'm not looking at the whole search chain, but yeah, that firstly, I've never seen that. Secondly, intermittent certificate failures is a weird kind of failure. That's weird. It's not the kind of failure that I'd expect to see either all the time or never, not partially. To answer your concrete question, we can check for us, right? But I'm pretty sure that these certificates are signed and by a certificate authority that is trusted. I don't think we're load generating certs here.
I can get more details from the IT department if they have any specific or weird filter about that. And yeah, I mean,
Does it
I
happen?
mean,
Does it happen intermittently when you're in your office, or is it consistently in your office and then when you're home? Because then it might be whatever sort of intranet you're running in your office or anything like that.
consistently in the office. If
Yeah, okay.
I immediately switch to a hotspot from my mobile phone, everything works fine.
okay. Sorry, I thought you said it was intermittent in the office. Yeah, not to make this your problem, but that kind of sounds like your office's networking is doing some like man in the middle snooping, which you should take.
Okay. By the way, it's not in Red Hat offices. It's another kind of place. So okay. Thanks for the info.
Yeah. Separately, if you really wanted to debug this, we could like put some more debug logging inside a packet that's doing the dependency fetching, but I don't think you're going to get much information out of this. I think someone is like sitting in the middle of your SSL chain and messing with stuff.
Okay. Cool. Thanks. I'll let them know. Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
Super useful. Super useful. Thank you.
Hey, anything else that people would like to bring up?
Just a sort of not really an update, but just kind of keeping the updates on the multi-arch world. So I think I was just late breaking news, like in the Paketo Slack, there was a little thread with Dan Makusa and Jericho and me, which Jericho is sort of like actively working on the like multi-arch for the jammy tiny Buildpacks builder. Which, as we discussed in our working group meeting a couple of weeks ago, is sort of like the next of the steps, right? So we did like the actual stack itself, then we'll do the Buildpacks builder, then we'll do the build packs that go into the Buildpack full builder, and then we can kind of like build the whole builder out. So still moving forward on that. I think Jericho's waiting on pack 32, which, as we talked about, came out earlier. So hopefully we'll have a multi-arch Buildpacks tiny builder in the next few weeks. That's my hope.
Awesome. So quick question on that one, because obviously I'm interested from the UBI stacks as well. What actually happens from the builder stack point of view, the stack image? Do you end up with an actual image for every architecture? And I know very little about multi-arch when it comes to this stuff. So
I wish someone else was here I wish Jericho was here. My understanding is, and this is like, you're really pushing my understanding of like Docker at this point, is that you can have it's like a manifest, I think is the terminology, which is like a pointer on the Docker Hub or, on your registry, which points to the same like image, but with like different images. I don't know the right words there. Forrest, do you have better words?
My understanding is that like effectively you can during a build produce like a single pointer that points at two different images that are on two different architectures that are represented as one image, and then those are both in the manifest. And then when you run, you can specify what platform you want to run on, and it will fetch the appropriate bits for the appropriate architecture. That might be a simplification of what's happening, but that's my understanding of what Docker's doing. They effectively they want to have it so that you have one Docker image that has one pointer, and inside of that one Docker image, it has a way to point at the appropriate architectural image bits. I don't know if that's even like subcomponents, like they break the stack itself down into like different layers where you can run on different architectures. I mean, that seems like it would be I don't know, impossible, but what do I know? But yeah, that's my best understanding of it. I think that you could probably get a more technical definition from like Jericho if you're really looking to get into the weeds. But if you just want to know that there's some magic that is written into the manifest, and you can build both images at the same time and then push them to effectively one spot in a registry.
Cool. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be interesting. I mean, just did a quick check to see like UBI for the base images. We've got AMD 64, ARM 64, PowerPC 64, and System 390, which is obviously everybody's favorite portable platform. So I imagine that means we're going to end up building a bunch of random stuff at some point.
Yeah. So I think that once we get the actual build packs themselves providing dependencies that work on ARM64, I think the actual machinery of generating the images is the same for like stacks, builders, build packs, etc. It's
Okay.
like we create a manifest instead of like just a single image. And that's work that Jericho has already like put in the pipeline for the tiny stack, right? That's how we make a tiny stack with these two images. We ran into some edges around pack and like picking the wrong platform and causing like breaking changes.
Yeah, I
So
saw
the
some
pack,
of those.
yeah, they fixed that. So pack can also allow you to set the platform at build time. So that should also give you the nice side effects. Once we have all this tool chain in place, you should be able to say like on my local ARM64, ARM64 MacBook, I can do pack build with the AMD 64 architecture and vice versa, right? So I could,
Yeah.
I mean, you probably shouldn't be pushing images from your local MacBook to your production cloud, but like you can see that how that could work in the future. Like you
Yeah,
basically,
I mean, as the rise of non-Intel silicon becomes more prevalent, it's definitely something we're going to have to take into account a lot more. And I suspect at some point we'll start seeing non-Intel systems in production running non-Intel images, which will make interesting inroads into security for buffer overruns and stuff like that. Because obviously the same stuff isn't going to work on different architectures. So what's the CVE at that point if your image is on a different arch? That's going to be interesting.
that is, yeah, I hadn't thought about that because they probably, well, no, because the kernel is still the same, right? Your kernel and your libraries are still the same, so they should.
But
Anyway,
usually with a buffer overrun, you're injecting assembler into a memory space beyond where the buffer overwrite happens and then causing the stack pointer to corrupt so it will start execution within that buffer. So you'd need to know the architecture in order to know which payload to deploy to that particular image at that point. And not all payloads might not work on all, things can change is what I'm saying. It'll be fun. Well, anyway, I think the extensions are going to be clean because the extensions that we've got are only really authoring Docker files and the Docker files are applied over an image. And so that step, I think, will still work, providing Kaneko runs on all the different areas. That'll be cool. But yeah, I'll follow the work that you guys are doing for the other build packs because that will pretty much pave the way for what we need to do for anything else beyond that then.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would say there is just that what you just said is predicating the assumption that the pack build platform flag works with extensions, which I have to assume it does, but like I haven't spent any time looking into that at all, right?
Yeah. It should do.
Anyway,
I mean, pack supports extensions through every other part that it does now, so it's quite good.
yeah, hopefully we'll have a more concrete project update in the coming weeks. It's my hope.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. I'll ask one more time. Any other open discussion questions that people would like to have? Nope. All right. Well, thank you all so much. It was a productive meeting. And thank you for taking copious notes, Ozzy.
See you later.
Yeah. Bye.
See ya.